Well, we are in this very special month of Kartik, and within this holy period, there are some particularly special days, which are shining, extra brightly in this month. And we had last week, we had the disappearance day of Raghunath Das Goswami and Kaviraj Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. And coming up on Saturday is Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Divine Appearance Day. And today is the Divine Disappearance Day of Narottam Thakur. Very important acharya in our line. And, Narottam Thakur, he's someone who we may not, today, here and now, we may not feel his presence, like, for example, by comparison, someone like Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, these Bhakti Vinod Thakur, they're a little closer to us. We feel their presence a little more keenly. But Narottam Thakur, although he's, a few hundred years before, he played a very important role in upholding Mahaprabhu's Sampradaya. After Mahaprabhu left, then there were some key Vaishnavas who made a very important contribution in maintaining, upholding Mahaprabhu's conception. And Narottam Thakur, he's say around 2 generations after Mahaprabhu. And he did so, we know the Goswamis, Rup, Sanatan, Raghunath, Jiva Goswamis in particular, directly after Mahaprabhu left, they did very important work in upholding the Sampradaya. And then Narottam Thakur, after them, next generation, he also did very important work. And, he was a very great acharya, very great acharya. There's some comparison that's been made with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Sridhar Maharaj has made that comparison in terms of his mood, his, strong preaching style, and in terms of his the degree of his influence, the degree of his power and influence. He had thousands of disciples, and he, one of the ways in which he kept Mahaprabhu's teachings alive was through the kirtan, through song. It's a very powerful way, to connect with people, to touch people's hearts, through the medium of sound, through the medium of song. It's something that touches the heart and captures the mind in a very natural, kind of way, and so this is one of the primary ways in which Narottam upheld and also spread Mahaprabhu's teachings, through so many of the songs that we sing, and there are many songs also that we don't sing, but which he wrote, which are spreading the glories and the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nitai Pada Kamala, Gaurangera Duti Pada, these are, Sri Rupa Manjari Pada, which is considered, like the sacred anthem of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. These are all coming from Narottam Thakur. Actually everything is covered in his songs, from the beginning up to the highest points of the teachings and ideals of our gurus. They are all covered in Narottam's songs. And Gurudev mentioned, just to give us some idea of how powerful his presence was in the Gaudiya Vaishnava world, even several hundred years after he left, our Gurudev Srila Govinda Maharaj, he mentioned that, because Gurudev's family, they were Gaudiya Vaishnavas actually. Their conception was not exactly in the line of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but they were worshippers of Mahaprabhu and, Nityananda Prabhu. But anyhow, Gurudev mentioned that Narottam Thakur, his songs were the most prominent, amongst all the songs that they would sing, in the course of their worship and their sadhana. It was Narottam Thakur who had the strongest, place. And then Gurudev said, after he came to join the Mat, then it was Bhakti Thakur's songs that took a little more of a prominent position. But even so, we still sing, practically most of the songs we sing, if they're not by Bhakti Thakur, they're by Narottam Thakur, So very important place. But we have a few others have joined us. Krishna Mohini Didi joining us from Spain. Dandavat Didi, Dandavat.
Dandavat, Vishakha Didi, Dandavat, all the devotees, Dandavat.
And also Namapriya from Latvia has joined us. And we have Dandavat Namapriya. And also Seva Rupa Devi Dasi. I think this is in South Africa. We have also our Mexican Seva Rupa. I think this is our South African Seva Rupa. So welcome and Dandavat. So today's Narottam Thakur's Divine Disappearance Day. So we are trying to honor something of his divine glories. And here's Govinda Nandini, our dear sister from Brazil. So Narottam Thakur, there are many, there are several, how can we say, there are several books which have been written, Gurudev and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, they've mentioned a few, because he was such a prominent, divine person there that, many things were written about his, and so many incidents. And we've actually, I'm not someone who goes and studies all these different things, but, what we hear from our gurus, we are satisfied with that, So, we've heard a number of incidents in the divine life of Narottam Thakur from Gurudev and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, but actually they're just giving us like a few drops. There are many stories, and I've heard Gurudev kind of like mention a few other ones, but not in so much detail. So there are, many accounts that were written. And Narottam Thakur, he was born into they were a wealthy family. Their caste was Kayasta, which is actually the same caste as Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada. And it's a caste, it seems like they're considered something like Kshatriyas in some parts of India, like Shudras in other parts of India, but they're usually businessmen and they tend to be wealthy. And Narottam's family, they were very wealthy. And in fact, they were so wealthy that his parents were referred to as king and queen. His father was referred to as Raja because they were so wealthy and influential, powerful in their area. And what's the name of the village? Katori Gram was the name of the town that he was from, which I believe is in what is now Bangladesh, East Bengal at the time. And so they were wealthy. And last week we were remembering Raghunath Das Goswami, and there are some parallels in the life of Narottam because they were both like single children, sons born into these wealthy families, and they both had some pressure to continue with the family line, but had no interest in it, So Narottam was in a similar position, and we hear, from his childhood, he always had this natural attraction to Krishna Bhakti. And then there was one famous incident, and we also have to mention before that on one occasion when Mahaprabhu was on his travels, perhaps when he was going to or returning from Vrindavan, he stopped on the banks of this river, the Padma River, which was right nearby Narottam's birthplace. And Mahaprabhu's going by and he stopped on the banks of this river and he called out 3 times, Narottam, Narottam, Narottam. And it was quite mysterious. Nobody could understand, why Mahaprabhu was saying that, And anyhow, Mahaprabhu called that out and he continued on his way. And then sometime later, Narottam, not long after that, Narottam was born. And this is, shortly after Mahaprabhu leaving the world. And Narottam was born like right nearby that place. And then there was one incident when he was a young boy. I don't remember, maybe around 10, something like that, 10, 12, something like that. Narottam, he had a dream and he was told to go bathe in this river in the middle of the night. And when he entered that river, he felt this embrace from Mahaprabhu. And then he, left the river, returned to his home. But since that time, his mood changed completely, changed in the sense that his devotional mood became highly intensified. And he couldn't really continue with his, his normal lifestyle. And we hear it's even said that the luster of his body changed, that he took on this golden, he had a darker complexion. His complexion became brighter, more golden after that incident. And then, he became more and more absorbed in this deep mood of devotion, chanting and singing, showing symptoms of ecstasy. And feeling this need to go and take shelter of the Vaishnavas in Vrindavan. And however, his parents wouldn't give permission, And so, finally one day when his father was away on some business, then Narottam begged his mother and she finally gave permission. She gave him a few rupees and allowed him to go. And so then he reached Vrindavan finally. And also he also first went to Navadvip and he met with, we hear of this famous trio, Shamananda, Srinivas, and Narottam. They were the 3 of them. They were powerful, influential preachers in their time, particularly Narottam. So those 3, they also met, and they actually performed the second Navadvip Dham Parikrama. The first was Jiva Goswami, right? And that's what Bhakti Thakur is describing in his divine vision in Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, right? Bhakti Thakur is connecting with that divine live stream and seeing Nityananda Prabhu personally taking Jiva Goswami around all of the places connected with Mahaprabhu's Leela in Navadvip. So that was the first Navadvip Dham Parikrama. And then the next one was with Narottam, and it was Ishan, Mahaprabhu, who had been Mahaprabhu's personal servant in Navadvip in his family home, the family servant, Ishan. And I believe it was with the 3 of them, Narottam, Srinivas, and Shamananda. I believe it was with the 3 of them. Srila Sridhar Maharaj mentions it, but it's not completely clear at what point these 3 met, but around that time. And I believe they traveled together to Vrindavan. But first they had this parikrama of Navadvip, and then they arrived in Vrindavan, and they studied together under Jiva Goswami. They took initiation from different persons. I'm trying to remember who. I don't know, maybe someone else, maybe Chinmoy or Govindanandini can remember exactly who the 3 of them took initiation from. I can't remember, but they studied together under Jiva Goswami. And then we do know Narottam's guru was Lokanath Goswami. And maybe one was Bhugarba, and maybe one took from Jiva himself, but I can't remember. But anyhow, we do know that Narottam took from, and they and I believe Jiva Goswami also gave them these titles of, Thakur, Narottam Thakur, Srinivas Acharya, and Shamananda Prabhu. Now we use the word Prabhu in a more of a, general, broad, generous way. And that because Saraswati Thakur instituted that practice, but previously, in the time of Mahaprabhu and for long period afterwards, Prabhu was a very, heavy title. It was a special title that would be given to a highly on. Prabhu means Lord, means master. So you would use that for someone who you considered to be like your guru, so like Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Prabhu, this was like a serious title, for someone to have. So anyway, Shamananda Prabhu, that was his title. And we have to remember, of course, not the famous story in which Narottam received connection from his guru Lokanath Goswami, because we hear Narottam, he had received this instruction in some way, some inspiration, some vision from Mahaprabhu, instructing him to take initiation only from Lokanath Goswami. So Narottam arrived in Vrindavan, with this, determination that he had to take initiation from Lokanath Goswami. However, Lokanath Goswami had vowed not to accept any disciples. So this was a problem, who's going to come out the winner in this match? So this was Narottam's challenge, and he requested Lokanath something like 18 times. We hear he had not just once, or wasn't like once or twice, and it's a nice example because it shows like how determined you have to be. Like who has that kind of determination and perseverance and optimism? You get rejected 18 times. And you're still keeping hope, and you're still trying, and you're still begging. That's incredible. That's a meditation in itself. And we mentioned this parallel between Narottam and Raghunath, and Srila Sridhar Maharaj has also drawn a parallel between Narottam and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Because they both had strong preaching style, and also the way in which they came to be accepted by their gurus was also similar, because Bhakti Vinod Thakur had instructed Saraswati Thakur to take initiation from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. But Gaur Kishore also, he had, I see Subhadra there. Hola Subhadra. And also Suvasini Didi has joined us, Dandavat, and Ananga Krishna Prabhu, our dear brother in Tijuana. Dandavat.
Didi. Dandavats.
Dandavat. We're remembering something about Narottam and his disappearance day today. So Saraswati Thakur, he had received that order from Bhakti Vinod to take from Gaur Kishore. But Gaur Kishore, like Lokanath, had vowed he didn't want to take, whether he'd vowed or not, I'm not sure, but he didn't want to take, he hadn't taken any disciples. And that's also, a point, to appreciate, that they were not interested in prestige at all. Although there were many, especially in the time of Bhakti Vinod and Gaur Kishore, there were many false Babajis, who were, roaming, throughout society, collecting followers. But, Gorky Shore had zero interest, He just wanted to continue with his own bhajan in an authentic manner. And so anyhow, so Saraswati Thakur, he also requested for initiation, again, something like 18 times, and repeatedly rejected. And we hear that story, how he asked him, and the first time, and Gorky Shore said, oh, well, I have to ask Mahaprabhu, for his permission, and then come back later. And then Saraswati Thakur comes back later. Oh, I forgot to ask. I'll ask tomorrow, come back later, and like this, he kept pushing him back and postponing it. And also, it's interesting, Srila Sridhar Maharshi pointed out, it's interesting because Narottam and Srila Saraswati Thakur, they both became these great acharyas, for the purpose of spreading Mahaprabhu's message. And they had thousands of disciples, but their gurus, Gorky Shore and Lokanath, they both practically just had that one disciple each, So anyway, Narottam, he was repeatedly refused by Lokanath Goswami. But he was completely determined, he wasn't going to give up. And then finally, it's very intelligent strategy. And, and it's also interesting to note how we see different occasions when great Vaishnavas, they do devise some kind of strategy to capture the mercy of the Vaishnava, in their eagerness, to capture the heart of a great Vaishnava. We see some examples, so there's some validity to that, how can I capture the heart of a Vaishnava? How can I make a place for myself in the heart of a Vaishnava? That's a real achievement in life. That's a real achievement. So anyhow, Narottam, very clever. What he started to do was that he had noticed, and Gurudev, we can also say Gurudev mentioned how Lokanath Goswami, he was so renounced. He was an incredible Vairagi, completely renounced, to the extent that he wouldn't even keep one glass of water, one like pot of water. He had like some clay jug he used for water, and he would keep it upside down. And if when he needed water, he would go and collect it from the river and use what he needed, and then keep it empty, where he was resting, where he was staying. Because if somebody, that jug of water could become the cause of some dialogue with someone, right? If somebody wanted a glass of water, he'd have to give them a glass of water, and then there'd have to be some communication. But Lokanath, he was a bhajana nandi. He liked to continue his bhajan in a solitary way. Didn't want, good or bad, he didn't want any kind of association. So to that extent, so Gurudev mentioned, like, what kind of service could you do for somebody like that, who doesn't even keep a glass of water? Where is the service opportunity? and that, and then think about how merciful our gurus are, because they're creating service opportunity for us. They don't have to do that, but they're actually creating service opportunities, by opening temples, by giving their instructions. They're opening a channel, to the higher worlds. That's out of their mercy, not because they need anything, but because they're giving us an opportunity to do some service for the higher plane. They don't need the service at all. We're just actually we're like burdensome children for them. So it's just purely out of their mercy, that they create that, can you, like sometimes we even experience that with children, right? Like they want to feel useful. So you just make something up for them, right? You make up a job for them so they can feel useful, they can feel helpful. And actually they're probably just getting in the way. So our gurus are very merciful like that, they're giving us service opportunity for our own benefit, not because they need anything from us. But anyway, Lokanath Goswami, he was not of that nature. And so Narottam, thinking very hard, how can I attract his attention? How can I render some service for him? He observed that Lokanath Goswami would pass stool in the same place every day. There was some pit in some forest area, and he would pass stool there every day. And so Narottam, he began to he would go quietly in the nighttime when everyone was resting, not making a big show about his service, but he would quietly, anonymously go and clean that stool, every night. And clean it very nicely, with water. And so Lokanath, he began to notice this, that, not only was, because there were animals, right, that like pigs, they will come and they'll eat the stool, but it was obvious somebody was coming and cleaning that area very nicely. So Lokanath, he's curious, like who's doing this humble service? And then one night he noticed that it was Narottam who was coming. And he was very surprised because Narottam, as we mentioned, he was practically like a prince. He came from this very wealthy family, very educated, very wealthy background. So for someone like that to be doing such a humble service was very impressive and touched Lokanath's heart, very much. And then, that was it, he couldn't say no. And so Narottam begged him, please, Gurudev, please accept me. And Lokanath, he could not refuse him. And so he accepted him as his disciple. And one in this connection, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he mentioned one interesting point that he said, Narottam, he was such a devoted disciple and follower of Lokanath. And he said, however, he was not a blind follower of Lokanath. And this is something that is shown in his composition, Shri Rupa Manjari Pada, where, what is that song? It's the most intense prayer, aspiration for the service of Rupa. So it's interesting that Narottam, he'd never met Rupa Goswami. We can also add, he's, generation after Rupa Goswami. But he, in his innermost heart, he had that level of realization, our line is the line of Shri Rupa, and the highest aspiration of the members of this line is service, under Shri Rupa. And this revelation appeared in the heart of Narottam. And so he had this strong, very strong earnestness, intense, deep earnestness for the connection of Rupa. And so that is expressed there in that song, Shri Rupa Manjari Pada. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj also mentioned another song, which it's not one that we sing, and I haven't seen it, but Srila Sridhar Maharaj has quoted it, where he's saying something like, Kabe Mor Lokanath Hate Te Dia, something like that, but saying, like, when will Lokanath take me by the hand and put me into the hand of Sri Rupa. So it's a very interesting point, that Narottam, he had so much devotion for his Gurudev, but he could also understand and feel that, the end of this line is connection with Rupa. And so he had that aspiration that Lokanath would put him into the care of Rupa, Goswami. So it's an interesting point. And it's also, I also always feel encouraged and inspired by this example because Narottam, he never had the direct association of Rupa Goswami, but, through his heart's necessity, through his, service necessity, this revelation appeared within his heart, So in other words, realization, revelation, and Krishna consciousness, it's not dependent on physical contact, or physical association. But out of the service necessity of his innermost heart, this revelation, and this feeling came to him. So that is another point here. So anyhow, then Narottam, he, Shamananda, Srinivas, they completed their studies in Vrindavan under Jiva Goswami. And then there's the famous incident of the books, right? That they were given this important service. Jiva Goswami instructed them to carry, all the Goswamis, Rup, Sanatan, Jiva, they'd been composing so much important, revelation, teachings regarding, Mahaprabhu's message. And this is all taking place amongst the group in Vrindavan. But meanwhile, all the Bengali Vaishnavas, they also wanted a part of this, they wanted to see this, And I'm not sure if Chaitanya Charitamrita was a part of that, but possibly it was. And think about it, Chaitanya Charitamrita is revealing something which practically nobody knew, In other words, the internal nature of Mahaprabhu as the combined form of Shri Radha Krishna, right? That was previously unknown. Only a few very intimate associates of Mahaprabhu, had that revelation, So I'm not sure if Chaitanya Charitamrita was a part of this collection of books, but it could very well have been. It would fit in with the timeline of everything. But anyway, they had all of these precious books that the Bengali Vaishnavas, and we hear in particular Janava Devi, she was the consort of Nityananda Prabhu, and she remained in the world for some time after Nityananda. Mahaprabhu, after Mahaprabhu left, Nityananda stayed for some time, and after Nityananda left, then his consort Janava Devi, she remained for some time. And she was like the head of the Gaudiya Vaishnava group. And so we hear that she in particular had sent this request to Jiva Goswami and the Vaishnavas in Vrindavan. So Jiva Goswami sent these three, Narottam, Shamananda, Srinivas. Srinivas, he was, I think, a little older, and he was kind of like the head of this group. And so they set out with this bullock cart full of these books. And then there was that famous incident when they reached the border of Bengal in Vishnupur. And I don't know if we want to tell the whole story now, but that famous incident, I think most of you know, when the local king there, Raj Bir Hambir, he stole the books, and actually it was Srinivas. This pastime is more connected with Srinivas Acharya. Actually, Srinivas stayed behind to search for these missing books, and he sent Narottam and Shamananda ahead to begin the preaching. And the three of them had like particular areas. So Narottam in particular was preaching in the area of Assam, and which I believe is next to Bengal, but my geography is pretty bad. Maybe someone else knows. Tirtha Maharaj is from that area. We used to have some preaching parties that would go there sometimes, but and one interesting thing I've heard is that, so because we had some preaching parties that went there, and Manasa Krishna Prabhu, he went there once, but one thing I heard is that because the preaching of Narottam was so strong in that area, that the Gaudiya Vaishnava culture was more intact, it was more, was more pure, even today, it still had more of a presence and was more intact because of the strength of his preaching and presence, which is still felt today. But anyway, Narottam, he was particularly focused on preaching in that area. And then there were another famous incident in the life of Narottam was the first Gaur Purnima celebration. And it was actually held in his hometown in Katori Gram. And so, primarily organized by Narottam, as I understand. And it was like the biggest gathering. This was like a major event. We don't like to think of these things in a historical way, but if we are thinking of it in a historical way, this was like a major event in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Gaudiya Vaishnavas came from all over for this celebration. First Gaur Purnima celebration, Katori Gram, Janava Devi came and she presided over the gathering there. And there were 6 different deities that were installed at that time. It was a very grand event. And one thing I've heard about that event is that there was some type of, they had like a series of different special events, programs that went on during the course of, it went on for some days, this festival. But one thing I heard from one devotee who'd read some historical accounts, some some reports that someone had written at the time. They told me that one of the main highlights was Narottam's dancing. That he was apparently an incredible dancer, very beautiful dancer. So that was one of the major highlights of this festival. So that was one very special incident in the divine life, Leela of Srila Narottam Thakur. And a few other incidents we've heard. As we mentioned, he had many thousands of disciples. And one point of controversy about Narottam is that he came from formally came from a lower caste, what's generally considered a lower caste. Yet because of his and within the Vedic culture, there's some taboo about taking initiation from someone of a lower caste. But Narottam, because of his great Vaishnavata, then many Brahmins came and they overlooked that taboo and they requested and received initiation from him. So then this created a controversy within the Brahmin group, because there were many who were offended by this. How can Narottam, he's coming from a lower caste, how can he have such arrogance to give initiation to those in a higher caste who are higher than him? So there were many Brahmins who were offended by this, you know, and they had something of a campaign against him. And one story we heard from Gurudev, very funny story we heard, is how at one time there were a group of Brahmin pundits who were they wanted to come and debate with him to demonstrate that they were superior to him. And however, at that time, Narottam was not in such good health, you know, wasn't really up to facing them. And so his friends, Ramachandra Kaviraj, he was a very good friend of Narottam. And I believe he took initiation from Srinivas Acharya. And he and Narottam, they were like best friends, you could probably say, very good friends. You know, and you hear in you know, in that song that we sing, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Doya Koro Mode, Narottam, he mentions there Ramachandra Sangha, what is it? Ramachandra Sangha Mage Narottama, something like that. But he's praying for the company of Ramachandra. You know, they were very good friends. And so anyway, Ramachandra Kaviraj, he thought, oh, I have to protect my dear friend, you know. And so what he did is he set up this like little shop, little stall, like a market stall on the outskirts of the town. And they were selling some items that travelers would normally buy, like some pots that I think that like clay cooking pots, something that any traveler would pick up, you know. And so they posted themselves, you know, dressing undercover like ordinary shopkeepers, Ramachandra and a few others. And then this group of Brahmin pundits, they arrived, and sure enough, they stopped to purchase some items at this shop. And Ramachandra, he proceeded to enter into a debate, some type of philosophical or Sanskrit, you know, debate. And he defeated, and Ramachandra defeated these Brahmins. And they were very surprised, because they thought, this man, he's just an ordinary shopkeeper, you know. and you know, how is it that, you know, he's so qualified? And so then they asked him something like, you know, is everybody in this town like this? Like, what's happening? And they said, yes, don't you know, this is the town of Narottam Thakur, you know. Everybody in this town is brilliant, you know. We know what to speak of how brilliant he is. You know, we are nothing compared to him. So they thought, oh, well, like if we're defeated just by an ordinary shopkeeper, you know, on the edge of the town where Narottam lives, we absolutely have no hope with him. So they turned around and they you know, they went back to their homes. Very funny story. And then the other famous incident regarding this controversy was surrounding how Narottam left the world, because Narottam, you know, he left in a very unusual manner, you know, and that was because of this situation with these Brahmins. And so what happened is that Narottam, in his last period in this world, he began to show the sickness, and the Brahmin community, they rejoiced over this, you know, and they made some statements, you know, oh, you see, because he made so many offenses against the Brahmins, now he's suffering, now he has to pay his karma. And so they, you know, they were very pleased over this situation. And Narottam, of course, he didn't care, and he finally left the world after showing the sickness for some time. But meanwhile, Narottam's disciples and followers, they were very distressed, because they thought, you know, if Narottam leaves the world like this, then this will this will feel like a victory for the Brahmins. They will say that, oh, he had to die like this because of his sins against us. So they prayed to Narottam's holy form, please, please, Guru Dev, don't leave like this, please. If you leave like this, all of your good work, it will be, lost. It will all be ruined. It will all be spoiled, if you leave like this. So please, Guru Dev, please don't leave like this. Please, you come back, for some time. And so Narottam, he heeded the request of his disciples, and he came back to his body for some time. And normally the Vaishnavas, they avoid these kinds of so-called miraculous events because it's something of a distraction from the cultivation of pure devotion. Common people, they're impressed by such things like, people coming back to life from the dead, or, walking on water, or curing a sick person, things like this. Common people, they're very impressed by these kinds of things. But the Vaishnavas, although they have the power, to perform, these kinds of miracles, so-called miracles, they consider it something artificial and distracting, because we are only interested in a heart connection with the Lord. We don't need any display, grand displays of power, So normally these things are avoided. But if there's some service necessity, if there's real necessity, then they will, they will manifest such power, if it is needed. And so, there are a few exceptions in the history of the Vaishnavas, and Narottam is one of them, where he made this kind of display. So he came back to his body, and he remained for another 2 or 3 months, something like that. And then finally one day he made an announcement, and he announced, like some public announcement to his followers, that I'm going to leave on such and such a day, at such and such a time, in such and such a place. So anybody who wants to see this, come here. And so it was on the banks of a river. I'm not sure if it was the Padma River or it could have been the Ganga. I'm not sure, but on the banks of a river, it was where he had instructed everyone to come. And so he came to the banks of the river, and he proceeded to walk into the river. And then finally, as he's entering the water, his body turned into milk, and dissolved and merged with the water of the river. And there were hundreds of people on the banks of the river, observing this, witnessing this, and so then everybody could understand what even the ignorant and offensive persons, they could not but accept who Narottam was, and they all made some apology, and they were able to rectify themselves because of Narottam's mercy. And so Narottam, for that reason, he doesn't have a samadhi, in the conventional sense. But in Vrindavan, there's a pushpa samadhi, a representative samadhi there for him. But his physical form is not there, as in the case of other exalted Vaishnavas. So Narottam Thakur, we are so highly indebted to him, and as I said at the beginning of our meeting, his power, his influence, it is, we are still feeling that today, although he may not be as well known, as are some of our acharyas in more recent history, nevertheless, because of the work, the preaching work that he did, Mahaprabhu's line was, upheld for much longer. So we are very greatly indebted to him. Anyone else want to add anything?
Didi, I just been listening to Gurudev, and you're mentioning like these people performing miracles and stuff like that. And it seems like in this video that Gurudev's calling this a cheating tendency. I'm wondering what because like Narottam Thakur, you're saying normally we don't show this power. The Vaishnavas don't show this power, and and Gurudev is seeming to call this type of power like cheating tendency. Explain. Do you know a little more about that?
I would like to hear exactly the context in which Gurudev said it. But we know there are many persons who, like a yogi can achieve this kind of power, and it's a cheap way to impress people and to gather followers, right? We don't need to mention names, but there are some famous persons in the world who have created large followings and gathered power for themselves because they have this kind of power. But from the Vaishnava perspective, it's not worth anything. Actually anyone can achieve that kind of power if they go through the process. If they these are called siddhis, right? And they can be achieved through following the yoga system. So if anybody follows that, and of course from a material perspective it's not necessarily an easy thing, but still it is something achievable. Anybody can do that, but we are not impressed by that. We are impressed by devotion. And that is something not even comparable, to some of these yoga siddhis. So yeah, I expect Gurudev meant it in that context. It's a cheap way to impress them, because we conditioned souls, we are very ignorant and simple-hearted, and we are easily impressed by these kinds of things, these like physical displays of so-called power. But in the big picture of things, it's not a very impressive achievement. It is a small thing. There's a place in one of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's books where he says, it's very funny the way he says it. He says something like, "May God save us from the miracle men," or something, you remember, something like that, because it is dangerous and it is cheating, because these things, they're impressive, they capture the attention, but ultimately it's not worth anything. It's just a distraction, and it attracts foolish persons. It's taking advantage of our foolish nature as conditioned souls. So yeah, is that clear?
Yeah, I think that, because he was mentioning the example he gave was when Mahaprabhu made who was it? Srivas Thakur, his son, or Srinivas, his son, speak after he passed.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. And Srila Gurudev was giving some caution, like normally this isn't the Vaishnava style, something like that.
Yeah, he was saying this is cheating, but for preaching it is teaching.
Oh, really? That's how he said it.
Yeah. So I could see that with Narottam Das Thakur, his example.
Right. Same thing. Yeah, same thing. Yeah. Actually, I also heard Gurudev mention how in some places in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he's describing some incidents when Mahaprabhu performed some kind of miracles, and how Kaviraj Goswami is really exalting that and celebrating that, And, you know, like, for example, when Mahaprabhu cures that leper of leprosy, you know, he embraced, I think, was it Vasudev, his name? And he, you know, that Brahmin, I think it might have been a Brahmin. But anyway, he had leprosy, and we hear how he had these worms coming out of the sores in his body, and he'd pick them up and put them back. You know? And but anyhow, how finally Mahaprabhu embraced him and cured him of his leprosy. And then Gurudev said, you know, how, you know, that it was something that puzzled him a little bit. But then he understood that, like, why was this being made such a big deal of, you know? And then Gurudev said, but I understood that Kaviraj Goswami is telling these things for the sake of common people, you know, because, you know, lower minded, you know, persons of less intelligence, they will have more faith in Mahaprabhu, because so for their benefit, you know, these kinds of descriptions are made. But otherwise, you know, for the Vaishnavas, like, that's nothing. You know, Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord. He can do anything, and that's nothing. You know, that's nothing. And what, you know, what is meaningful is taking place in the world of consciousness, in the world of heart exchange. You know, that's what's, you know, heart transformation. That's where the real miracle is, you know. But, you know, as Gurudev said, you know, that's a very nice way of putting it. It's cheating, but it is teaching. So, and you see how merciful, you know, our gurus are, that, you know, they're creating they're giving an opening for anyone, you know, to enter and put some faith into these things. So that is their mercy.
Dear Vishakha.
Yes, Rukmini.
So, when you were telling us about the Narottam's way, how he disappeared, I was remembered that in another class you were telling us about a story. Well, it's not a story, that something that happens in Brazil, that Gurudev, it was a kid that was drawn, and that actually Gurudev bring him to life. And it was just like, it's to just remind me that when you were like telling us that.
Yeah, it's true. Gurudev also had some miracles. Yes, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, there were a few things with Gurudev, you know, actually a few miracles like that. There was the boy in Brazil, and you know, that boy, you know, he's what's the real miracle is that boy, you know, he went back to his home, and for many years he didn't come to the ashram. But about 3 years ago, he was inspired and he went to the ashram. He's serving full time in the ashram now. He's like the main servitor, Nishinga is his name. He's the main servitor there. He's Trivikramar's, you know, star disciple. Yeah, and there were a few other miracles, like the dead telephone in Vrindavan, right? That gave Gurudev that land, the Kaviraj Goswami's land. That was another prominent one. Yeah, Gurudev was very mystical. All right, well, anything else? Suvasini Didi, anything you want to add?
No, whatever you say is very nice, beautiful. We are very indebted to Narottam Das Thakur for the songs we sing, right, every day. So many songs, right? And Gurudev talks about in the song, you know, he says that, you know, we cannot express our heart, what is in our heart, and through their songs, we know what is in our heart. Through their songs, it is for our benefit. They are expressing that, for the conditioned souls. They are expressing our heart. So the prayers, so we are very indebted to them. Yeah.
Thank you, Didi. Nice. Maybe Govinda Nandini or Ananga Krishna Prabhu. Anything you want to add? And also Somya Sham Prabhu has also joined us from Ireland. Dandavat. Sudevi's waving to everyone. All right. Well, should we wrap things up there, Chinmoy Prabhu? Unless there's anything else you want to add.
Unless there's anything else, I just want to mention too that on Facebook, Nadia Priya from Ukraine is sending her Dandavats.
Dandavats, Nadia. Very happy to have you with us. In Kharkov. All right. Jai Shri Narottam Thakur ki jai. Tadiya Shubha Tirobhav Mahamahotsavatiti ki jai. Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Jai Vishakha Devi Dasi ki jai.
Jai Gurudev.